Hi, everyone, and welcome to a new episode of our live stream series, The Future of HR by Jobelon. I'm Sophia, and I am stoked to be here today with our amazing guest, Stephanie Darvill, the co-founder and COO of Aline. So you will actually walk us through the world of learning and the future of learning with us and how your learning platform Aline is utilizing and validating the learning experience. But how are you today? I actually didn't ask you before either. How are you today?
Hi, I'm really happy to be here. I'm good. It's a new week, so I always get a lot of energy on Monday. And the sun is shining, so it's always a positive, especially being in Sweden.
Oh yeah, that's a rare thing to see. So I'm happy having a great start to your week. Yeah, so we're gonna dive into a super exciting topic today, learning, which is not only crucial in order to keep up in a fast-paced world and to future-proof our workforce. I actually read, so I did a little bit of research before this, and I read an article the other day from the World Economic Forum that said that I think it was 1.1 billion jobs are likely to be radically transformed in the next decade because of technology. And I was like, okay, how do we prepare for a big paradigm shift like that? And also on a company scale, we know that, or most people know by now, that the lack of career advancement or career development is one of the big or major factors for why people leave their jobs. So upskilling, reskilling, learning overall is crucial, not only to keep talents, but ensure that we keep evolving our workforce and make sure that we're future-proofed. So yeah, it's a super exciting time, and I can't wait to dive deeper into that with you. But first, I just want to, for people that don't know Stephanie yet, just to give you a brief background story. How did you end up in tech, and where did the idea of Aline come from? Like, what did you feel like was missing in the market?
Yeah, nice. And also, to people, please kind of connect with me and leave any questions or comments as well. Would really love to get those. And I'm excited to dig deeper into what is a fulfilling workplace, or what can it become, and how we see the different trends of learning. I think we've been screaming about the importance of upskilling and reskilling for a few years now. And now it seems like people are really taking it seriously, which is good. But Aline it's an edtech, so it's a learning platform, a learning experience platform that we have. We were started in Sweden, so there's three of us co-founders, and we have a wider team now. And we met actually in a incubator program 2.5 years ago. So that's when the company that is now called Aline was formed. And one of my co-founders actually had the sort of seed of the idea 2 years previous. So it's about 4.5 years in the making, what we have now. My co-founder, Innocent Mugenga, he started to see a problem with the way we consider professional development. And also, I mean, even now, when I say I work in education or I work in ed tech, the first question people always ask is, oh, which children do you teach, or which children is the product for? And I think that's one of the biggest problems, because still we think, or we associate education with children. And that's schooling. Schooling is very important. That's what we do in our early years. But we would be really naive if we thought that we could go to school for 18 years and then we'd be set for the next 60, 70 years, however long we'll be working for after that. So we see that we have to be constantly learning, updating our knowledge. But right now, if you don't go into formal education, which could be a university, it could be in a course, kind of anything in a classroom would be classified as formal education. You won't be considered educated in that specific area. And so we see there's a lot of interest, and there's a lot of, people learning every single day, informally. So anything outside of a classroom. And they can be learning through peers, but also we see there's so much content online with podcasts, videos, online webinars, online events like these. But, you know, anything around that, you see the amount of articles that are shared, and you can learn so much within that. But as the world works today, if you don't have proof of it, and you can't prove that I've listened to 100 hours of a podcast about content management, for example, I could be very well qualified and have the skill set that is required to have a role like a content producer. But if I haven't got this one kind of shiny paper from a well-known university or a well-known formal education provider, I probably won't get those opportunities. And that's the problem we saw, and that's why we created Aline. So Aline, we have two products. For the individuals, we have an app. And so we bring all different pieces of content together. We don't create the content ourselves because that's not the problem. Having structured content aligned to goals is. So we have a platform where anyone can add content on, so we can also collaborate with your peers. And then more importantly, you tie it or align it to your learning goals, so we can give you better recommendations. And then above all, the view is that in your profile, you're also going to get evidence of how you're achieving your goals and what type of learning you're doing, maybe every day, but at least every week, towards your next goal. So the view is that at the same time people share their LinkedIn profile or their CV, when they're talking internally or externally with professional development, they will also share their Aline public profile. And that shows, you know, the LinkedIn shows your past, and Aline profile will show you the future. So it will show you, okay, these are the skills I want to have. This is what I've done towards getting them. And this is where I'm headed. And if anything, if you're going to bring someone into a new role, it's more important to understand where are they going in their journey rather than where they've been.
Exactly.
And that's where we created Aline.
I love that. And I love how Aline also changing the narrative of not only how we view education and learning, right, but also how we experience learning. Because as you mentioned before, like when we think about learning, we usually think, I think most people think about the classroom, or, you know, like in a very formal way, but then we learn unconsciously without knowing that we actually learn, because it's in a more relaxed setting, and we use and we utilize technology, and we learn through technology while we're scrolling, while we're reading an article, and as you mentioned, like while we listening to a podcast, without labeling that as learning. And also, like you mentioned, and in terms of like how we actually validate it when it's unregimented. So how does Aline facilitate that validation of learning, and what can any recruiter, also forgot to mention before, feel free, if you have any questions, thoughts, feel free to put anything in the chat, and we'll bring that up throughout the conversation. So how do you facilitate the validation of learning, and what can hiring managers and recruiters that are tuning in right now, what can they gain from that approach when they're looking for new talents?
Yeah, I think the most important thing with this is, and the same as, you know, being able to create a fulfilling workplace, it's starting with the learner or starting with the individual. And I think previously it's always started with, let's set the company goals, and then we'll filter them down to the individuals, and they'll create their own learning goals based on what we want from them. And that doesn't make them, and we know, like, to feel fulfilled in the workplace, you want to feel a sense of belonging, you want to feel purpose, you want to feel like you're growing and you're performing. And so it's really hard to feel a sense of purpose if someone's telling me my purpose rather than me creating it for myself. And so we have, and that's why we have the two products, which I can speak about the second one now. So we have the app where we have, micro quizzing. I think the way that schooling works a lot of the time is that, you learn something for a whole year, and then at the end of the year, you cram as much information into your head as possible, and you kind of just throw it out on that paper. And then often actually you forget a lot of what you've learned. So one of the most,
I think we can all relate to that.
Oh my God, yeah, cramming. I was a big crammer when I was at school. And actually one of the most effective ways to remember and to learn and be able to use that, new knowledge is spaced repetition. So it means coming back to something in smaller bite-sized amounts. So you could have, we will have micro quizzing. So if you've read an article, we can flip it back as questions, but maybe we just ask you 3 questions and then you can go on to the next topic. So it's about, and we all know when you set down goals, if you set, I want to become this, or I want to become an expert in one area, it's very overwhelming when you look at everything you need to do. It's a lot easier if you cut it into chunks. So that's how we work with the app in itself. And that's why we also were mobile first, because we want people are learning in their flow of work and life. And so therefore we needed to not start with desktop because that's not in the flow. And then we created as well our second platform, which is for probably a lot of people that are tuning in. It's for any of the leaders of a company, especially the head of people and culture, the head of learning and development. And that's a dashboard which shows an overview of the app activity. But it also, the leader can set the company objectives, and then it's up to the individuals to have set their goals, and then they tie their learning goals onto the company objectives. So you can see the alignment between the two, but the important thing is we start with the individual and then they decide how do their goals link to company objectives. Not all of them are going to, and not all of them should either, but a lot of them, if people want to improve like leadership or public speaking, or AI machine learning, they're big buzzwords at the moment, big learning topics. Those do benefit the company. And you also see now, I think, I was looking at reading a report the other day, and it said that 95% of employees would stay longer at a company if their learning and development was invested in. And so you see hiring is very expensive and very timely. And so actually you could actually keep the skilled people in your company by just investing in their learning and development. And it doesn't need to be this huge investment of sending them off site, bringing in a facilitator for a whole week. It can be as simple as, paying for their usage of an app, which they can learn in their kind of flow of life.
What do you think about, because you touched on it just now, the informal learning versus structured learning? Do you feel like structured learning is also necessary in one way or another, or what is your opinion there?
I think it's definitely necessary, or definitely valuable. I'm not trying to disqualify the value of formal learning, but it's not the only way to learn. And a lot of people still look at that as the only way to prove that anyone knows something. And so there's the 70-20-10 model of learning. Right. 10% is formal education. So 10% is in the courses, the university, the classroom setting. And that's where 10% of learning happens. And then you have 20%, which is informal learning. So that could be, bite-sized learning, articles, podcasts, videos, etc. And then 70% is on-the-job experience. So that's sitting with different mentors, coaches, sharing content, sharing information with each other, learning together. And so the problem is that we keep looking at only 10% to see if anyone is skilled. But the statistics say there's 90% of learning happens outside of the classroom. And I think another, big topic in leadership and development, rightly so, is about bringing more diversity, equity, and inclusion into recruitment, but also into the workforce. Yes. But that can't happen if you're still only looking at formal education as the only validation of your knowledge, because we know that, the people that aren't being included in the workforce today are the ones that are more likely to not have the financial, cultural, geographical, logistical ability to go to these kind of fancy, normally very expensive and normally very exclusive schools and universities. So my advice to anyone that is working in learning and development is, don't say or have this objective that you want to be more, to have more diversity, equity, and inclusion in your way of recruitment if you're still going to keep doing the same thing.
That's a good advice. And also, like, I think the narrative when it comes to learning is that we still have that outdated idea of what learning means and looks like and feels like. And also this, like, adapting to a new and more modern way of experiencing learning also means that we can do it in a more democratic way. Which also leads to my next question, which is like, how can Aline democratize the art of learning and help people give more an equal opportunity for professional development?
Yeah, I mean, for us as well, I mean, we believe, obviously, that the key to, you know, having a more equitable learning opportunities, and the key to having a more equitable workplace and fulfilling workplace is informal learning, because that's available to everyone. And the main barrier is having an internet connection and a phone. And most people do have that. So, you know, the way that we're working is that we provide the platform where people can find relevant content, they can share content to collaborate together, and then they can get the evidence to showcase this is what I've done towards getting my goals, this is how it relates to the company objectives, and this is also how I learn best. So we can also go into, like, you know, there's not one answer in how to do learning and development. There's also not one answer in how to create a fulfilling workplace, because it's very dependent on the individuals and understanding what they want and what they need. Whereas it's previously been very much decided from the top and then trickled down. And that's why we start with the app and then it feeds into the dashboard, rather than you start with the dashboard and the company objectives, and then all the individuals are told that they have to work towards these specific goals, but they're not given the context behind them. They're not given, they don't have the understanding as why they're important. So with our product, it's a lot more learner centric, which can increase motivation. And we know that companies that have a good learning culture are on average, I think it's 50% more productive. And they are 92% more likely to innovate. And more innovative companies are going to have a stronger chance of survival and profitability.
Yeah. That speaks for itself. That speaks volume.
Right.
And I think when it comes to learning, it doesn't have to, like you mentioned before, it doesn't necessarily have to be only attached to the company objective, right? It can be, and also, like, whatever you're learning, whether that's connected to the objective or not, will add more value, will add more perspectives. It will add, like, a different view. That's also one of many, many reasons for why diversity and inclusion is pivotal and important. But and nowadays, where, like, we live in a world where it's the candidates market. We don't live in a world anymore where employers ask the candidates, and they give a big list of responsibilities. It's a two-way street nowadays, and people ask, "What's in it for me?" And people want to generally be a part of more of a meaningful workplace, and it's more of a lifestyle than going to a job and then going back home. So it's super important, like you mentioned, to find, like, a good balance between how everything that you want to learn, how you can add value to the company, but also to your own professional growth. Everything doesn't have to be connected to the company objective.
Exactly. And I think that's the thing. There often has to be this immediate return of investment in, if I send X on this course, then I have to see what is the boost in my sales tomorrow. And that's not realistic, because it's a long-term thing. If you have people that are, growing and curious, it might be one day, the learning that they've picked up through a podcast triggers a thought, which triggers another thought, which leads to the new product for your company. And it ends up being the star product that, brings in millions of revenue, but it's not going to be, you can't pinpoint it directly. And I think that's also why, we created that it's an app that people can use in different contexts, because it's a person, right? So it doesn't matter if I'm with my job or it's by like individual, if I leave that job, I should be able to take all that learning and evidence with me. And I think that's where a lot of people, when they talk about, you know, having a fulfilling workplace, they mistake a sense of belonging to a sense of owing. And that's why I think it can be quite toxic when people call their companies, you know, families. And I think it's a really interesting concept, because I used to also think about it like, I probably used the word family a lot before. And then when I listened to this podcast and they said, if you talk about your company like a family, it can be quite dangerous, because then there is this sense of owing, that you owe so much to the company. And then the stakes are a lot higher, because, you know, they're so much more emotionally invested. And family is unconditional love, which it's not in a company, because it's dependent on your performance. And so if you're not performing, you may not always be part of that family. And so it's better to say, you know, think about like a sports team analogy. We're all going to help each other out. And if one's falling down, and you're of course going to pick them up, but you ultimately still have to be performing towards the common goal to be on the team. And I think that's where some companies, you know, put this box of like, all your learning is locked in with us, therefore you shouldn't leave, because then you no longer have any evidence of your knowledge. And that's not what people want, or people should have to deal with either.
No. Oh, that's super, super interesting. And I completely agree. And I think the correlation between, do you mind elaborating a little bit on that too? Like the correlation between, you touched on that before, between learning, informal learning, and creating that sense of belonging, and why is that so crucial? And how, if someone's listening right now who's like, okay, where do I start? Like, what's the first step? In terms of implementing that, and also because it's an implementation, but it's also a change of mindsets in like how we speak about learning, and how we approach it, and how we view it. And as we mentioned before, like I think the majority of us think about formal learning, we think about a classroom, but there's it's all around us, and we learn while not even thinking about the fact that we're learning.
Yeah, exactly. And I think I do believe that, you know, informal learning is the key to have this sense of belonging and having a fulfilling workplace. And that's because by investing in someone's informal learning and say, hey, here's a platform or whatever it may be, go and learn and kind of like fuel your own curiosity and see what's interesting to you. And there will be, you know, you will contribute towards the projects, but it's not, you have to learn this sales material to then sell tomorrow. And by investing in people's informal learning, what you do is you show them that you care about them as a person, not as worker number 4. And so I feel like I belong in the team. I feel like my company cares about me as Steph Darvill, not as the XYZ manager, whatever it may be. Which means I'm also willing to kind of work harder. I mean, work harder in terms of the form of like give better results. I don't think anyone should have to work harder in terms of longer hours. But by having that, I realized that, you know, you care about my professional development. And I think it was Richard Branson, I might misquote it, said, you know, care about or invest in someone's learning development so much that they want to stay, but the door should always be open. And so if they want to go, they should be able to go, and they should stay because they want to. And so I think that's the thing that companies should be doing as well. And I'm going to invest in my company's learning and development, because we know having bright minds is really good for the camaraderie of the team, for the productivity, and for the company growth. But ultimately, I'm investing in this knowing that a lot of people will leave my company and take that knowledge with them. But that's not a problem, because I'm also going to bring knowledgeable people back in and have an environment which fosters this creativity.
I think that's such a crucial point, what you just said about, because you want to feel like you're being cared for as a person, not only as the sales manager or the marketing manager. You want to be cared for as the human that you are. And especially with new generations stepping into the labor market with a different idea of what a fulfilling workplace means to them and want to be seen as a human first and foremost. And I think that's extremely crucial, and not only to benefit, like you mentioned, the sales presentation we're doing tomorrow or the event we're going to speak at next week, but see it more as a long-term, a lifelong investment, because that's what you guys are speaking about, that lifelong learning. And that's a never-ending journey. And it's more complex than learning this part, like this part of knowledge is missing in order to get to the next step, but it's much more complex than that. So really, I think that's super interesting. I'm seeing now that we're getting a lot of comments, and we only have 5 minutes too. So I'm trying to utilize this time.
I was just looking as well. I do see that I have my 2 fantastic co-founders are here.
Yes.
One of them has been answering the questions as well. So that is what you call teamwork.
That is teamwork for sure. So I had a first question from Sigurd here. I'll just pump that in quickly. So he said, I'm a strong believer of ad hoc and personal learning not to be structured. Making it formal will kill the joy and drive. Habitual learning is a strong complement for your formal development. So any thoughts on this from you, both as well as the group? Love the topic.
I mean, it's a very good question. I think it's important that, skills and in the end, knowledge, that's built by, tiny habits of change. And so by building the habits of, it might be learning, and I'm not one that wants to force people to learn every single day. For some people, they rather segment it into a couple of days a week, but we are learning every week. That's just, a fact. And so when you develop that habit of, hey, now I'm going to, learn on this, and you have a platform like Aline that can help give that recommended content, what that does is that then turns into your skills, which then turns into your knowledge, which then turns into more professional opportunities. So I think a lot of people think they have to dedicate, 4 hours in an evening to start learning, and they see it as this big mountain to climb. And so they often don't get started, when actually you can just get started by, one tiny habit, or reading one article is literally you starting informal learning. And so see it as smaller chunks rather than this big project of, announcing to everybody, hey, now I'm going to be learning on this topic. And then the expectation that the expert comes out. Just, listen to one thing every day or every other day. And that is you developing your knowledge, which will lead to much more professional development skills as well.
Definitely. And also we all learn differently. So just the knowing, because a lot of people don't think, or at least I don't think until we had this conversation, that me reading an article is actually learning. It's a part of, how I navigate my days and what I think is joyful and inspiring. But that's just like you navigate through your own curiosity. But I haven't actually seen that or like labeled that as learning. And I think just looking back at, going to school, and I think everyone has a very different experience of what like that very one way of learning that experience was for you. Some people, for them it's really easy to like have someone speak in the front of the classroom, and you listen, and then you write, and then you have a test at the end of the month. But then some people want to learn in a more practical manner and might not benefit from sitting in a classroom for 8 hours. Like, we're all so different when it comes to how we learn. I think that's also super crucial when we step into the workplace, and that might be squeezing in a 20 minutes session of listening to an exciting podcast, or reading an article, rather than, or if you prefer to do a 12 weeks course, that's great for you then. So it's just a matter of like finding exploring your own way of learning, and make that make sense for you, and also make it enjoyable, because it is, and it's supposed to be.
You have to enjoy the process. You have to enjoy and be curious about, and that's why it needs to start with the individual, because if I actually care about this area and want to learn in it, then I'm going to learn a lot better. I'm going to use that knowledge. But I think as well, it's important to understand, you know, if we actually look at how we worked 100 years ago, I mean, if we look at how we worked 5 years ago, it's worlds apart in terms of the tools we use, how we work, you know. But then if you think about the workplace 100 years ago and imagine that, and then you imagine the workplace now, it's completely different. Think about how we went to school 100 years ago and how we go to school right now. It's really not that different at all. And so there's so much innovation has happened in almost every other industry except education. And people are realizing not everyone learns best in a certain way. Some people learn by only audio inputs. Some people are visual. I'm a very big visual learner. I struggle to just hear a concept because I need to see it for myself. Some people learn best by doing things. And there's no one right or wrong way. It's just understanding who you are as a learner, and learning about learning as well is a really powerful topic to look into.
Definitely. And yeah, you gave a quick what it looks like from 100 years ago up until this point. I've seen that we're running out of time, but I have one more question that I really want to ask you. Looking into the future. Yes. So looking into the future of learning, where do you see learning? Like how do you predict that learning will evolve in the upcoming 5 years? Like how do you see like the future of learning unfolding? It's a big question, but yeah.
Good question. I wish I had this magic ball. No, but I think I see it evolving in the importance or the value that employers put on informal learning is going to go up. The amount we learn in times of the fragmented learning, and I mean that in a good way. Some people use fragmented in a bad way. I mean, in terms of like people realizing that you can be learning, tiny snippets of information and then just piece all of that together, and suddenly you have this big, amazing house of knowledge. But it's one brick at a time. And I think people realizing that, they say they estimate that a lot of at least 30% of what we do now can be automated in the next 5 years, which gives us that 30% more time to invest in things like learning. And there's a lot of debates with AI machine learning, but one thing they can't beat us on is the human brain and our ability to learn and develop. And so let's invest more time in doing that and updating our knowledge as much as possible. So I think I see it in that the way people value informal learning will change. The way people actually learn will also change as well. And the way people implement that knowledge. We see even now, like people are opening up to share their knowledge and collaborate a lot more. And we know social learning is one of the most impactful ways to learn. So we're going to see that happening a lot more. It's less competition between who knows more and more about let's throw all of our knowledge into the ring and let's see what we can create together.
That's a beautiful wrap up. And I love that you mentioned, AI and automation and how that will it takes away a bit of the work that we used to do, but it also allows us or gives us more time to dive deeper into things that are true. Like we talk about the technological advanced society and how that affects the workplace, but then it enables us to focus even more on the human part of it and become, more sharp in terms of emotional intelligence and relationship building and solving complex problems. So I think it's such an exciting time to be alive, and also changing the narrative of what it means to learn and implementing that in the workplace as well in order to create a more fulfilling workplace.
Yeah, for sure. We're in the information age, therefore AI can really help us in filtering all the information down so that then we can actually work with the information, because the consumption is one side of it. We actually need to put it into practice for there to be value from it as well.
Definitely. So we are actually running out of time. We're 4 minutes off. I hope that's not. I hope that's okay for everyone. I just wanted to say I'm also sorry for not having the time to run through all the questions, but we'll make sure to answer them afterwards. Thank you so much, Stephanie, for joining us today. I feel like we only scratched the surface. I feel like we need a part 2 on this episode, but it was wonderful having you here and giving us insights and in your view when it comes to learning and how to change that narrative and how to use and utilize Aline in order to create a more fulfilling workplace and having more fulfilling employees at your office. So I hope you gained knowledge and new insights from us today. And I am looking forward to seeing you soon. Thank you, everyone who's tuned in
so
today.
Much, everyone. And please reach out with any more questions. But we'll continue this conversation for sure.
We'll definitely continue this conversation. Thank you so much, everyone. And I'll see you soon.